Good evening and welcome to this December 12th meeting of the Somerville School Committee. I'm sorry, that is not true. It is I was looking at the call for the week. It is December 16th. My apologies. Welcome to this December 16th meeting of the Somerville School Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2024, this meeting of the School Committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting of the City of Somerville after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. With that, we will start with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, a nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Carmona, will you please call the roll?
Through the chair, we have Ms. Barish.
Here.
Mayor Ballantyne, President Owen Campen, Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Bitton.
Here.
Ms. Bitton.
Here.
Dr. Ackman.
Here.
And Dr. Phillips. Chair Cripson.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great, thank you. I will now introduce our interpreters. I believe we only have Spanish here this evening. Spanish, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Ati Peñate, seré intérprete en esta reunión. Si desean escuchar la reunión en español, por favor, cliquen en el botón de la derecha de abajo. Muchas gracias.
Do we have our student reps here? Okay. If they come, will you just let me know? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment. So before we begin, I will just read our instructions. Welcome and thank you to those who have signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. You will have 3 minutes since we just have one person signed up. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their role within the district. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up, and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals and policies, or role of the superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion in the public record. So with that, Jess Perez Adams, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. I am Jess Perez Adams. I live on Porter Street in Somerville, and I am associated with the district in the sense of I'm a parent of 3 children at our schools. I am a CPAC member, and additionally, I am the Kennedy Schools, one of the Kennedy Schools co-vice presidents of their PTA. Thank you for having me this evening and allowing me time to address the school committee and allowing me this time to speak. I come here this evening as I understand most of the agenda regarding the school committee addressing everyone who is here in person and listening online is to discuss their goals for the remainder of the term that they're here, that we are going to be discussing equity and what is equitable in moving forward for the children of Somerville regarding their schooling, regarding access to curriculum. As the committee has stated in the agenda, equitable access to programming, equitable resource allocation, whole child teaching and learning. These are all incredible goals that as a parent, I am so happy to see, especially coming from a school district a few years ago before we were here that did not value equity or whole child learning in any way. That being said, my 3 children and many of their peers and many of the children that I have met through the CPAC, through the PTA, through community events are neurodivergent or have other kinds of special needs. I requested this time to speak because the equity part of our committee meeting does touch on disparities concerning finance, background, demographics, things like this, but I want to urge the school committee to also include in their fight for equity to consider the disabilities of children that may or may not be visible to the naked eye, that we update to our district as one of the most progressive districts and one of the most progressive cities and one of the most progressive states, what it looks like to be neurodivergent or have special needs, as many of our kids are getting left behind due to their invisible disabilities such as ADHD, high-functioning autism, anxiety that presents in ways that aren't always clear during the school day but do interrupt their access to accessing the free and appropriate public education that they're entitled to. We need to update as a district what it looks like to identify these disabilities in kids, update our educators and their professional development on how to spot it if we're going to truly be equitable and progressive as a district and as a committee. And I just really appreciate your time in allowing me to speak this evening to bring this up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to our first item of business, which is the report of the superintendent.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the public comment. I always feel that this work has to be done in collaboration with the entire community, and I do appreciate the feedback. As usual, the focus of the superintendent's update, we try to group that around the themes that we have. Today, the focus is about preparedness, and we always make sure that creating a safe and welcoming learning environment and inclusive facilities is always a priority for all of our students. And around preparedness, this of course is an important topic, making sure that our facilities are meeting the needs of our district and that we have a maintenance plans in place for all possibilities, such as the weather, as an example, is critical. We are collaborating with the city and the mayor's team to develop a prioritization system to maintain all optimal building conditions and proactively address potential concerns. This is a critical pillar of our strategic plan. Safe and welcoming facilities have a direct impact on wellness and achievement and is the basic foundation of ensuring we hold high expectations for our students and the learning environments that they occupy. In your packets, there are 2 memos related to facilities. One is about preparedness, and the other one is about capital investment, and both of them are updates of documents that you have seen at some point before. And also tonight, we have our friends from the Somerville Special Education Advisory Council, the CPAC, who will be presenting a family survey that they conducted. So we are thrilled to have you here, and also we are excited to be able to give you an update on some critical infrastructure. So that is the introduction of the focus of the work tonight. So in your packets, we provided an update on a weather preparedness memo. And that memo basically is pretty much the same thing that you had last year. There haven't been any significant changes around it. The thing that is different from last year, I don't know if you recall, but we had a couple of challenges in how we treated the ice and the snow around the automotive base in the high school, and that was a significant pain point for the community, for the high school, as well as New Way Full Circle. Luckily, we are not dealing with that issue of warranty anymore. That cement has been cured, and that means that we won't be dealing with any of those challenges. DPW will be treating the surfaces the same way that they treat every surface in the city. So that's good news in regards to that possible point of tension when it comes to snow. The other update that you have in your document is a facilities update. That document actually provides a breakdown of some of the critical infrastructure needs that need to be addressed. These are big ticket items for the most part. Those are items that end up in what we call the capital investment plan, and these are things that the city will be addressing in a systematic way. They require long-term investment for the most part. These are items that are in the range of $50,000 and up, and they require a 1 to 5 year cycle. These are items that also have to be reviewed on a yearly basis to be able to understand and get a sense of how the development of these big ticket items is progressing. So the way these items ended up in that list was in collaboration with DPW, IAM, the building principals, and the work that our chief of staff has done in visiting the schools and identifying critical infrastructure needs. So we are excited to announce that the city is looking at this in collaboration with our team and looking at the long-term investment. So there are things that are not included in there, like the Argenciano kitchen. The work that is happening there is already part of the work that has been, the funding has been assigned to that, and we will be able to complete that by February. But for the most part, the items that you have in front of you are things that have been discussed in collaboration with the city and will be brought up to the attention of the city and will be finalized in the very near future. So I don't know if you have any specific questions. I will have Amara with me also if you have any particular question regarding to the items in the list.
Mr. Green and then Ms. Patone.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for this. The work that you and your chief of staff have done to get ahead of and make the facilities issues transparent is, I'm not going to say unprecedented, but certainly unprecedented in my near decade on this body. So I want to thank you for that. But I'm greedy and I want more. So my first question, I have two, but I can ask my second one after, Ms. Patone, is would it be possible to get some like urgency, timeline, things on some of these things? Like I see things like HVAC replacement, and I'm like, is that just because it's time, or do we think there's an imminent threat of it failing? Like, obviously we can't do everything at once, as much as I would love to. So some sense of what we think the urgency is around various tasks so that I can do my favorite thing and yell at the city would be greatly appreciated.
I'm going to have our Chief of Staff, Amara Nosike, share some thoughts around that.
Through the chair, thank you, Dr. Carmona. We are hoping to get timeline specifics in the new year, so in January. We've been meeting with the city and they've been giving us some kind of ranges, but we want to be sure, and so hopefully they'll come and present the urgency of each item.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at the different districts and how they prioritize the CIP. There are best practices. One of those is actually mapping out these different items, and there is actually a district that had a dashboard. Unfortunately, that was the only one that I saw was not up to date, but one of the complaints in the business, if you will, is that the CIP often is not, so sometimes it comes up and at the attention of everyone, but is not renewed or is not actually assessed in terms of other priorities. So I am, in looking at that and in reviewing some of the best practices, I would love to see like a dashboard around that, but I just have to say that in collaboration with the city, we went from not really having a good horizon of where things are to now having been at the table and talking about what are the priorities and how they are strategizing around that. So I'm really excited about the progress, and I think that, we will continue to identify ways in which that can be more public and more public-facing. So that's in the works.
I had Ms. Batone, and I think it's back to Mr. Green. Ms. Batone, and then Mr. Bitone.
Thank you. Through you, I have a question about the topic of buildings, but I also have one about weather, which I can circle back in the queue for. I had a conversation about sound mitigation, and particularly for the Healy in the West and their cafetoriums. I don't know if that's something that they predict is going to be under $50,000, because that has not been included, but I know that we do have population of students that have sensory issues, and these cafetoriums in particular, the Healy, the West, and I think the Kennedy as well, but I haven't validated, are really challenging for a lot of students. So I'd like to know how that might be wrapped in. I don't want that to fall off the list. Thank you.
Through the chair, we have expressed that as a need, and there's some items where they said that it's not as appropriate for the capital investment plan, so there are some things that aren't on this list based on their feedback from the city.
Through you, did they say why, or is it a cost thing, or?
That's a great question, and I do want to, and through the chair, I do want to reiterate that it's really important for them to come and speak on some of the reasons, because it was around, oh, that might be sort of like more of a DPW thing or this department, and it's not really appropriate for the CIP, and I don't have all of the answers on that, but I will make sure to pass that along.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Oh, yeah. Did you follow up, or you want to?
Just very quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like that the school committee gets that feedback from the city, whether they're in person or whether it's through a memo. And also, at some point, we may have to decide that we want to put in our budget, to have a consultant come in and evaluate these spaces, because I think that in total, this is going to cost more than $50,000, but I'm no expert on sound management. But there's a reason. There's very high ceilings. There's a lot of complexity on doing that kind of work, but people do this for a living. So that's just a marker.
Yeah.
Good point. I think one of the challenges is that in creating priorities, when Amara did the visit with principals, we also asked what are some of the biggest challenges that we have, and in some cases, if that hasn't bubbled as a concern, it is missed in the first round, and so the question is coming back and see how we move things that are in a priority list to add other things in there. So, we're talking about things like roofs, like boilers, like infrastructure, things that are quite expensive. And so it all depends on the cost, and it also depends on how the building principals prioritize those needs. But your feedback is also one thing that can be accounted for that. I think it just will require us to come back and decide how are these priorities that were already been established and need to be shifted.
Through the chair, thank you for that feedback. In my opinion, this is the type of things that the principals and the educators and the students put up with, right? Because this has been brought up. I've been on this committee for, 8 billion years, 11 years, and this has come up every year by families and for kids that really just have a hard time participating in that space. So I think it's almost like a positive kudo to the principals that say, I just have to deal with this and I have to prioritize other things. But at the same time, we shouldn't have to have our students put up with, this very loud spaces. And if we can, it doesn't necessarily have to happen this year, but I really want to make sure this doesn't fall off at some point. And I 100% understand boilers and roofs are, high priority. So I just want to make sure this doesn't drop, because it has dropped. It keeps coming up and it keeps dropping. And that's not a criticism, it's more, I'm going to keep advocating for it.
I had Mr. Green and then Mr. Bitone.
Before I ask my question, I just want to echo Ms. Patone's points. And actually, I want to say it's a criticism because I've been asking for this for the Healy, especially for at least 5 years now. And I keep getting answers until we know we're going to do it. So, I would like that we know we're going to do it to turn into actually being done at some point. That said, my question is actually about the swing space in the 1895 building being on that list. does that mean that the city has abandoned this desire to one day take it over, and now we can start thinking about how we would use it educationally?
So,
Guessing the answer is we don't know, but I will let Dr.
so what is
Carmona
the
speak to that.
question, and what do you want me to pursue?
So in the
Yeah.
past, the
So
city
the
has
1885 building has historically been a target for the city to take over for its own purposes, and we actually have a resolution in the book saying that's not happening until we get a building plan, which is, we still haven't gotten. That being said, so like seeing it on the list for priorities for swing space renovation suggests that the current thinking is that we will not be giving it to the city. Is that actually the case? And if so, does the city know this?
So I guess related to that question would be, was the choice to put 1895 renovation under swing space possibility a district choice or a city choice? Does that question make sense?
Through the chair, those were not submitted by the city. Those are our priorities.
Okay. So I think that
ask-
answers.
Well, I'm going to ask
that-
again, does the
Yeah.
city know this?
Through the chair, they've seen the list of our priorities.
Okay. I have Mr. Bitone, then Ms. Barish, and I think it was back to Ms. Bitone.
Thank you, Chair, through you. It's a great segue from my colleague, Mr. Green, because I'm grateful that the city has invited us to participate in this process and identify our needs. I'm glad that we're going through this exercise, and I'm also, I find the inclusion of the swing space as a critical need to be right on point. And I also found it interesting, the selection of spaces. Those are the Cummings School and the 1895 buildings as the only buildings I'm aware of that we could use as swing space if the need arose. This is a really critical need for our district, and I just want to uplift that and express my gratitude to your leadership, Mr. Superintendent, and your team for identifying that to solve this problem, which we don't know that we have that problem until a school has a critical issue. So that was it. Thank you.
Ms. Barish, and then Ms. Bitone.
Thank you. Through you, I think it would be helpful, having heard that the city responded that some things on the list were not appropriate, I think it would be helpful to me to know what was on the original list from the district. So if that's something that you could share at some point, that'd be great. Understanding that, probably you talked about some of the things with the city and they said, not now or not that, and then you came up with this sort of final list. That's my understanding. So yeah, I would like to see what was on the original list that the city recommended you revise.
Through the chair, just to clarify, some of the things on the list weren't appropriate for a capital investment, but they remain priorities for us as a district to be addressed just through a different mechanism. So it's not that they're no longer on our priority list, if that makes sense. And if you want an exhaustive list of district needs, deferring to Dr. Carmona, but I think we should be able to get that to you.
Yeah, that's essentially, I expected that they are still district priorities, but I think it would be helpful for us to know what the additional priorities are. Also, I saw that the warming center at the Cummings School opened, I think, last week. I don't know if you have any updates on how those improvements are going, and I expect you may not, but if we could get the city to come and also speak to that, that would be helpful. That's all. Thank you.
Can I
Yeah,
just,
please.
when it comes to priorities, I don't know if you probably are familiar with the question around the building or the extra classroom that was needed at the Argenciano. So that when we push for that one as a priority, we actually have to move some things around. And there are some things that will be addressed in some, there's also the question about the Healy, the space in the Healy. So as we look at those things, we're thinking, what if it's not done right in this year, what is the timeline that we have for this project? So I think that question is tied a little bit with the question that Mr. Green had around how can we actually see this in a much more visual way. And short from having a dashboard or having like an Excel file or something that would allow us to see what's priority 1 year, priority year 2, year 3, and year 5, it will be difficult unless we have that. But we don't have that breakdown at this point yet. But just I wanted to say that the small items sometimes might be dealt through the DPW instead of IAM. And so I think that, again, the question around the soundproofing, I forgot if the cost is less than $50,000 is dealt through a different avenue.
I have Ms. Catone and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm going to just do a quick follow-up on this question about the Cummings. Thank you. When we did our vote, we specifically asked for, I'm not going to get the exact language, but a date, not a date, for like a plan or an assessment about what it would take to bring that building up to speed. I would like to ask through the superintendent, what would be the date we would get something like that? Whatever we specifically asked for, I don't have the right language. So that's simple, but the other question I had was about the weather. First of all, thank you for bringing the memo. Super helpful to sort of bring this fresh in everybody's mind and understand our priorities and how we manage the more inclement weather. I've had brought to me in the past, and I'm sure my other colleagues, is the removal of snow and ice along the bridge over the McGrath, particularly for the Winter Hill families and families at the east. This would probably be a good opportunity to ping the state or whoever else manages this to make sure that what generally happens every year is that we have a bad day, we get a lot of snow and ice, and everybody starts complaining. So I'd much rather do what we can do to get in front of this one. So thank you for that.
Sure, and then Mr. Green. Yeah, go ahead.
Just as a neighbor of that bridge, I do know that the apartment complex that is right there, part of their commitment, that got them permission to build that building, because it was like an auto zone or something for years, is that they committed to maintaining that bridge. So, if it would take, so that's just to say, it may not take tax dollars to do that. It may just take some gently applied pressure to the owners of that building who had made that commitment.
So it sounds like that may be more of a city issue than a state issue, even though
I just would like to equip our liaisons to the city with the most information that I have possible.
Okay. Mr. Green?
Actually, that was my question, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. If there is nothing further about this, the next item in your superintendent report.
Great, thank you. The next part is I am going to have Mr. Ildefonso introduce our next team. So, Mr. Ildefonso, could you please do us the honor of bringing in to the stage our CPAC friends?
Sure. Through the chair, I'm Ildefonso Arellano, the Director of Special Ed. Good evening, everyone. Before I do introduce our new CPAC board, I would like to acknowledge the previous chair, the outgoing chair, Michelle Lippens, who for many years has been the chair of the CPAC and who has tirelessly advocated for our community, for our families, and for our special education students. So just a thank you to Michelle for all her service as the CPAC chair. With that said, I would like to I'm pleased to introduce the new CPAC board. We have Liz Eldridge, who is one of our chairpersons. Yeah, we clap. We have Kathleen Hornby, who is a core chairperson. And we have Shu Talon, who is the secretary for the CPAC. So they're going to be coming up and doing a presentation on a parent survey that they currently did. So I'm just going to hand it over to all three of them. Thank you so much.
Hi. Before we start, we had two people who had called into the public comment section. We just want to make sure that their voices are heard.
There should be Jennifer is on there. She can hear, and then also Janelle Denson.
So CJ can hear and speak up, but Janelle can hear as well.
Okay, I will allow to go back and do public comment if they've been here and waiting and we just missed them. If there's no objections from the committee, I'm okay with that. If you guys want to just stop before your presentation, if they're on. Oh, yep.
I wouldn't call this an objection, but I would love to get a sense of what happened so that it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say, Jennifer, if you want to unmute yourself, Jennifer, and we're gonna, sorry about that.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, good evening. My name is Jennifer Morgado. I live on Curtis Street. I'm a CPAC member, a mom of 2 kids with autism, one in 4th grade, one in 2nd grade, both at West Somerville School. I just want to thank Liz Eldridge, CPAC chairperson, for all her support. When we were struggling to get the right help for our son, Liz connected us with an advocate who helped us address his challenges, my son's challenges, with executive functioning, reading, and bullying from classmates. Liz showed us how important CPAC is for families like mine. Having resources like this is critical for making sure kids with disabilities get what they need to succeed. Thank you for listening and for your support for students with diverse needs.
And now we have Janelle.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Janelle Denson. I am on Grant Street in Somerville. I'm also a member of CPAC and a parent of a late diagnosed autistic school avoidant high schooler who loves animals and wants to be a biologist when they grow up. My child's journey has impacted my life in ways that only parents of kids with special needs can understand. As a single parent with a full-time job, it has consumed my every waking hour some days, and often I cannot work a full 40-hour week. I will be out of sick time in about a week or so, and I will need to start using my vacation hours to continue all the work that my child needs me to do to get them the education they need. My IEP team and I are on the path to finally finding my child what they need, and I'm not here to speak on my child's situation so much as just to shed some light on the survey data that I helped to review and analyze. It hasn't been presented yet, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but just to lend some idea of the work that Liz and Shu and Michelle have put into this presentation. I just want to speak a little bit to my job that I mentioned, the full-time job that I spoke about. I am a data analyst. I've been one for 25 years. I'm not an expert in creating surveys, but I do help HUD and the VA design data standards for homeless systems that they fund. And I do work with data to answer questions the data aims to provide. I worked with Liz, Shu, and Michelle after the survey was done to provide my expertise in interpreting the data. And I found the survey well written and the data to be of good quality, with questions having full responses and the optional questions had good engagement. I found the questions to be clear. There was a lack of non-English speakers who provided answers, and this leaves room for improvement for next year. I appreciate the board's transparency and collaboration, and also the public comment that we started out the meeting hearing, and Jennifer, who just spoke right before me. And much appreciation to CPAC and all the work that they put into this presentation. Thank you.
And now, bring back up. Sorry about that.
Start. Good evening, school committee members. We are delighted to return to present CPAC's initiatives, which were born from the results of our survey and a recent community meeting. So we're thankful for our members, including Janelle, who participated in this effort. And so thank you, Ildefonso, for introducing us. I'm Shu Talon. I'm the secretary, mom of a 3rd grader and a 6th grader at the Argenziano. Our family has had to bring in a third-party advocate to fight for some basic needs for our child who was born with a genetic disorder. So I joined CPAC to support others on a similar journey, to share lessons learned, to ask them questions.
Hello, my name is Liz Eldridge. I'm a proud mom of 2 children with dyslexia, whose needs unfortunately have not been met in Somerville Public Schools. I'm here today as CPAC chair to support and strongly advocate for families and our special education students with complex profiles and needs.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us on the agenda tonight. My name is Kathleen Hornby. I'm the parent of a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at Kennedy, one of whom is in their 2nd year with an IEP. Going through the process of getting diagnoses and an IEP for my child was overwhelming and isolating, even with my experience in state education policy and access to tremendous resources. I'm here to make sure that other Somerville parents and caregivers know that they are not alone, and to advocate for every disabled child in our schools.
So a bit of background on our survey. It was based on the Massachusetts CPAC, other Massachusetts CPAC surveys, and fueled by state guidance. I'll quote, "A needs assessment survey is one of the guideline recommendations from DESE, the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to learn what the primary concerns are among parents of students with disabilities in their community."
As an introduction, this survey was conducted at 9 schools and in 4 languages, thanks to the tremendous efforts of volunteer translators. We received 105 responses, 75 of which were from families with children who have IEPs. That number represents 8% of the district's population of students with IEPs or 504 plans. Again, we are deeply grateful to everyone who took the time to respond to this extensive survey. We won't go into the details of the responses this evening, but I hope you will review them if you haven't already. Overall, the feedback that we received reveals a disconnect between respondents' needs and the support and services that they are receiving from Somerville Public Schools special education, as well as a desire for more transparency and communication. Our focus tonight is on the 4 initiatives that Somerville CPAC is proposing in response. So I'm going to start with the first initiative, which is about educating caregivers. One of the most powerful quotes relative to this initiative from our respondents was, "There is no guidance. So if you don't know to ask for a particular thing or the magic language to use, you would never know that a service or accommodation were possible." I've responded to the survey. I didn't write this, but I feel like I could have, and I know this resonates very deeply with a lot of parents who've been through this process. While the special education department is beholden to the written goals and benchmarks within an IEP or 504 plan, the burden is on families to evaluate the services provided and to ensure that services are implemented. This is incredibly challenging for most parents and caregivers, especially those facing additional barriers due to structural inequality. In light of how difficult it is to find summer programming, it's telling that only 26% of participants who qualified for extended school year or ESY participated in the services offered. Families cited poor, last-minute, or non-existent communication about service schedules and inadequate programming and lack of coordination between SPS programs as barriers to being able to participate in extended school year services. From reviewing survey responses, it is clear that families need guidance on topics from parental rights to legal timelines, including how to initiate an evaluation, how to resolve a dispute, and how to navigate next steps. Even the basics of what is and is not possible with special education are not readily available. Somerville CPAC's goal for this initiative is to develop tools and resources for families so that they can advocate for their children effectively and know that their IEPs and 504 plans are being implemented. CPAC officers also intend to establish Friends of Somerville CPAC as a 501c3 nonprofit organization for future funding initiatives, educational opportunities, community organizing, and advocacy efforts.
All right, I'm here to talk about initiative number 2, Empower Caregivers. A quote that jumps out on me on this page is, "I wish I had more visibility into what my daughter is learning and what the expectation is from her." 37% of our survey respondents were not confident in the school year ahead. CPAC officers know that out of connection comes action, and empowering caregivers is our second initiative. Creating connection virtually and in person to strengthen relationships and propel advocacy is essential, from establishing parent liaisons at schools to school committee liaisons. Consistent translation, WhatsApp, and other social media groups to encourage discussion and problem solving. Additionally, collaboration with outside entities like the Somerville Commission for Persons with Disability and local businesses and organizations are among our plans to empower caregivers. Additionally, in the new year, CPAC will be rolling out an ongoing listening initiative to allow families to voice their concerns and questions in real time, which we will allow CPAC to not only support families navigating challenges with special education, but also to establish and better understand any patterns or trends with special education across the district.
The third initiative is transparency and accountability. There is a strong perception that the special education system as a whole is mostly designed to gatekeep services and provide the bare minimum. That was a direct quote. Although there have been program updates through the year, it's difficult for us to ascertain whether the feedback has been addressed. For example, earlier this year, the school committee passed a motion to add $86,000 to the special ed budget. Do we know where that money went, or what programs, what benefit has come out of that? According to Massachusetts regulation, the Parent Advisory Council duties shall include, but not be limited to, advising the district on matters that pertain to education and safety of students with disabilities, meeting regularly with school officials to participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of the school district's special ed programs. The key word here is participate. A participatory role refers to a position where an individual actively takes part, contributing their ideas and opinions and actions to the decision-making process, rather than simply being passive observers. We're not asking to be decision makers, but we are asking for a seat at the table. And we're asking to be invited to actively engage in the process. And we believe that collaboration will help us all budget our time and advocacy efforts efficiently and effectively. So we propose a volunteer from this group to be our school committee liaison to help us identify opportunities and connect us to the right personnel to fulfill CPAC's mandated role.
Initiative number 4 is a bit of a heavy lift here, so bear with me as I work through this one. The quote that speaks to us on this one is, "Parents need less info sessions and more advocacy. CPAC can be a powerful voice if it chooses to be." And we're all here today because we are choosing to be the advocates our community wants and needs. CPAC wants to support and ensure the district's successful execution of early identification, evaluation, diagnosis, and programming for all children in the district. This relates to the Child Find Law. What is Child Find Law and why is it important, you ask? To quote the law itself, it says, "In addition to federal law, Massachusetts state law requires the school committee in every city, town, or school district to identify the school-aged children residing therein who have a disability, as well as diagnose and evaluate the needs of such children, propose a special education program to meet those needs, and provide or arrange for the provision of such special education program." In regard to Child Find Law and programming, survey results were concerning and detailed that 84% of IEP and 504 families are seeking support and services outside of Somerville Public Schools, thus indicating needs are not being met within the district. In regard to Child Find Law identification, evaluation, and diagnosis, survey results highlighted that 76% of special education evaluations were initiated by caregivers, not educators. Why is CPAC concerned, you ask? Looking at dyslexia alone, the most common learning disability in our district, but also in the country, it's known to affect 1 in 5 students. Using that information of 1 in 5, with 4,927 students enrolled in Somerville Public Schools, we should have roughly 985 students diagnosed with dyslexia. However, looking at the 2023 and 2024 school year data from the DESE radar, we have roughly 298 students diagnosed with dyslexia. For greater context, the district has identified a total of 995 students with disabilities, representing not one disability, but 11 different types of disabilities. These numbers don't align. Why does early identification matter so much? According to the National Institute of Health, we know that most behavioral challenges stem from students' needs not being met, affecting not only the child whose needs are not being met, but also the climate of the entire classroom. According to the Department of Education, unmet needs, this is a quote, "Unmet needs may result in social, emotional, and behavioral challenges in the absence of effective support, therefore exacerbating mental health concerns, interrupting access to and participation in learning, limiting opportunities, and negatively affecting outcomes." So under the umbrella of Child Find Law, we're seeing a picture of identification, evaluation, and diagnosis being a challenge, and that students' needs are not being met within the district. There's a significant disconnect between the obligations outlined by law and the reality of what is occurring in our district. CPAC proposes working collaboratively with the district to examine the current policies and procedures and evaluate their effectiveness. CPAC proposes to set a date today to report back to the school committee with an update. We appreciate the school committee and the district's time today. It is CPAC's goal to work collaboratively with y'all and move the needle, set the example, be the leaders, and ensure that all Somerville students' needs are met. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I will open it up to the inevitable questions that my colleagues will have for you, so please don't go anywhere yet. Dr. Ekman.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for your work and for your analyses. I'm curious, you mentioned that this survey was built upon other CPAC surveys. So you've indicated perceptions of disappointment. I'm curious about the districts that you've pulled this from, what their respondents are like, and what you think is typical. And that isn't to say we shouldn't strive for, overwhelming joy from every single family, but I'm curious what your perceptions are about, how this is typical compared to other districts.
I just wanted to clarify, when we said we pulled it from other districts, we pulled questions as a model.
I understand.
So other districts and their results are not something that were shared openly, but access to their surveys and what their surveys said were shared openly.
Okay, so then, thank you. Through this, I would like to thank the superintendent and the district for being willing to share these data openly, because it sounds like that's not something that happens a lot of places.
Not sure.
Mr. Bichon?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Wow. I guess I just want to start by thanking the leadership of the CPAC for laying bare a number of challenges that we have. And we see it when we look at the MCAS data and the number of students with disabilities who are struggling. Those of us who have students with IEPs and have been through that process know what a challenge it can be, how frustrating, and how much as a parent or caregiver you feel you need to go to bat to get everything that your student needs. This is such important work. So I guess I am interested in us continuing to partner with you all. I would like myself and my colleagues to find ways to support to the extent appropriate and feasible for us to collaborate as you're proposing. I want to bring up an idea that I had raised at some prior meeting. I don't know when. Maybe it was the last time you all were here. To provide, to be able to, and I don't know what's appropriate, but to provide some administrative support for this group, because I think that's an area that, is something that we could help with, or at least I think there's a basis and precedent for. So, of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and I hope that we can be thought partners with you in addressing the real issues here and try to make the IEP process in Somerville and special education in Somerville as fulfilling as we can make it. So, thank you.
And just quickly to clarify, one of the requests you had was to have one specific school committee person as a liaison to CPAC. Was that the ask?
Yeah, we would appreciate a liaison CPAC, a liaison member for CPAC.
Somebody from the school committee. Okay, I just want to clarify the ask. I had Mr. Green and then Ms. Parrish.
Thank you. I want to thank you for all your work in the survey. There were some interesting things I'm curious about some of the demographic things that I think will help us get to the heart of how to solve some of these problems. First of all, I will say I was unaware that there was such a disproportionately large special education community at the Ardenziano. So I'd love to know your thoughts on why that might be. And secondly, I look at this question about communication and the real challenges there. And I wonder if we know more about the profile of the people who reported dissatisfaction. For example, if it's a lot of our Spanish-speaking families, then some of those answers to how to address that become easier. And so I'd love to know anything you may have gotten from the profile of the people, especially in the communication issue, who were dissatisfied with the district's thing, so we can figure out how to better reach out to them.
That is one of the initiatives that we have too. We want there to be more translation and more communication, because we know as a native English speaker, navigating the IEP system in itself is incredibly challenging, not to mention the barrier of language as well. We did translate the survey into 4 different languages, but we only received 1 response. So in Portuguese?
No, we received 1 in Portuguese and one in Spanish as well. But I guess to speak to the need for administrative help, that is something that is sorely needed for us to be able to reach a larger community.
So, obviously with 2 non-English speaking respondents, I wouldn't want that level of granularity as to how they responded on things, as that's identifying. But I do, and it's as much for all of us, because I think it's tempting. I've done it, and it's always a mistake. The temptation to go, oh, it's tough for me as somebody with privilege and power. I can only imagine how difficult it is for people to like those things. Sometimes that is true. Oftentimes the needs are not only different in degree but in type. So I would love to get more information as to how those, because I don't want to make the assumption that they're having the same challenges our English-speaking families are having. That said, I would love to know, like, when you were doing this outreach, did you perhaps tap into SFLC, which we know actually has a fairly good history of getting responses from non-English speaking families, and probably just some of the best work of that of anyone in Somerville. Did you reach out to them for help with that? If so, the question is why it didn't happen. If not, I'd encourage us to do that more in the future.
Can you? Yeah, we reached out to all the principals and the liaisons for that reason, because we knew that they were connected to different communities. And then who was the other entity that?
Padres Latinos.
Yeah, Padres Latinos as well. And you know, I think it's worth sort of understanding from the liaisons, like, where the breakdown was, because we felt like we did not feel that support. You know, we had one person I knew from Padres Latinos who did the best that she could to send it out to the community, but you know, the 2 responses is what we got. So definitely looking for assistance there.
Ms. Parrish?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, for all the work that you and others put into it. I appreciate the clarity of the initiatives that you're proposing. One that really, I guess, struck me was, and makes a lot of sense, your desire to be included on hiring committees. And before I was on school committee, I remember being on I think a principal hiring committee and an art teacher and a classroom teacher, but it didn't occur to me that special ed teachers might not even have hiring committees. So this isn't really a question for you, but more a question for the administration. I'm curious what that process looks like, because it just didn't occur to me that it wouldn't be similar to a classroom teacher or an art teacher. So I don't know if anyone can talk about that.
Just to be more specific, are we talking about the special ed teachers or team chairs or?
I think any of the above. Like I said, I think I was on a screening committee for a principal. I was on a hiring committee for a first grade teacher. I was on a hiring committee for an art teacher. But I don't know if hiring committees exist for special ed roles. So I'm just curious about what that process looks like.
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that we always have discussed with principals is that a good committee is also a committee that is well represented throughout the entire members of the community, parents, teachers. So this is the first time that question has come up, has the CPAC been part of hiring this or that? So that's a good question that we definitely will have to inquire. I mean, Ildefonso is here. I don't know if that has ever come up as a question as to if any principal has said, hey, can we have a member of the community to join us?
I haven't had that request, but it's I know that when I went for the position, there was a
correct. Yeah. So usually, like in terms of teachers, homeroom teachers or special ed teachers, I don't know how much the relying on a outside member or a member of that represents a team like CPAC has been part of that, but that's a question that we'll have to look into. But usually best practice is that we use a community member. Usually most of the schools have a community member that joins those teams, but it's a question that we have to look into.
Go ahead, and I'll take Mr. Green. Did you want to and then I'll Mr. Green?
Sure, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add Karen Woods has done a really excellent job over the past 2 years building out some very concrete systems and recommendations. So I don't think, unless in the case of, say, a director of a department, there has been a space held for a specific, say, community or district-affiliated organization, per se, unless, obviously, for the director of special education, for example. But there are set criteria that we're happy to get to you. I can't recall the exact for every role, but there are some general best practices that Karen and her team of the personnel team have kind of outlined and often include a member of the community. Again, it's not necessarily outlined from a specific group unless that makes sense for the role. But I'm happy to share those things with her, with you. But there are very clear outlines and structures and systems that have more recently been put in place, like the past 2 or 3 years.
Mr. Green?
Sure, I think this is actually an appropriate time, both thematically and calendar-wise, to put in a request I've made in the past, which I would love to add to our budget calendar, official space for feedback, like we do from PTA, for CPAC and LPAC, just as a way of formalizing getting that feedback in the budget creation process.
And I was just going to go back to the survey itself, feedback, and I apologize if this has already occurred to you, but it is a pretty long survey, which is great and gives us a lot of information. I'm just wondering if in the future you might consider 2 surveys, one that's really short and quick and easy, and one that's longer if people choose to and have the time to fill it out. You might get more feedback from someone who chooses a short one. I don't know, it's just a thought. I'm certainly no survey expert, and I'm guessing Mr. Green is going to disagree with me.
No, I actually agree with you because I am a survey expert, and what happens in cases of longer surveys is you get people with more extreme opinions because they're the people who care enough to sit there and go through the whole process. So a quick and dirty survey and an optional opt-in longer and dirty survey is actually a really good idea.
The survey did have the option of a rating scale and then an open response after that.
Okay.
So it had the option to participate as lengthily as you wanted to, or as just go through and click. But there was only a handful of questions that were required, but then there was a lot of opportunity to be able to engage where you wanted to engage and provide feedback if you wanted to provide feedback.
I think because this was our first one, we got very excited and wanted to know everything. So
baseline.
And I appreciate that and completely.
Yeah, to be clear, for a first survey, it's like these are like I'm giving advanced survey feedback here. This is not like oh, this is terrible. This is like having done polling for a living for a while. Yeah, this is.
And we have heard some feedback from community members that, we are trying to reach a historically challenging community, that a lot of these families are already pretty taxed, and trying to reach this community to begin with is a challenge. So we were commended by an advocate in the district that had said that, although we weren't at our 10%, because that's what we were pushing for was 10% of survey respondents, that 76 was a pretty darn good number considering this is a historically challenging community to be in communication with. So.
I totally understand. And it wasn't meant as a criticism, just as a potentially. Yes, Parrish?
I'd also like to request at a future meeting just to maybe a memo or a full presentation, but on how the district does comply with the child find law. Because I admit that I don't know exactly what procedures are in place to identify and diagnose the children in our district. And it's my understanding that it's not just the students who attend our schools, it's all of the children of school age in the district, which I think would be the particular challenge. So I appreciate that you raised that because it made me realize that I don't know what we do. So I would appreciate some kind of update from the administration on that. Thanks.
Ms. Paton?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you. This is a highly professional process that you went through, the survey, the presentation. I'm so proud to be in a district that people are willing and able to step up and bring this quality of work and advocacy to our district. So thank you so much for that. I want to just echo the request from Mr. Green about the budget timeline and sort of more formalizing that process. I know that we meet with the PTAs. We've brought it up before, but we do put together a timeline, and if, based on the superintendent's recommendation, I would like to hear what you have to say about how you might want to incorporate this. I also, I just kind of looked up our hiring process in the school committee policy manual, and it says, administrators responsible for hiring of staff and responsible for establishing a representative screening committee. So I think it's a really good question in terms of how do we incorporate families in general, and then families in particular that have needs based on these types of positions in special education. So anyway, that's the school committee policy that I found. There wasn't any more detail. And, thinking through, the third thing is thinking through what is appropriate for, quote, administrative support. What type of support, if we do apply to the multilingual learner pack, maybe what other districts do. Just historically, if anybody knows, we actually used to have a part-time person on staff. This was probably 8 years ago or 10 years ago. There was a position that supported the CPAC. I'm not saying we should have one, and it was part-time, it was not full-time. I'm just throwing that out there as a historical reference. So, but I would be curious to hear what administration would think would be helpful. We don't want anything that would be performative. We want something that would really do what we can do to support these families and support the work of these volunteers that really, again, have committed, it's clear, a great deal of time and effort went into making this happen. So, thank you.
Through the chair. First of all, I think, as I said originally when we started the conversation, is that our community participation is meaningful. And I think that it helps us fine-tune the work of making sure that every student has access to learning. So I appreciate that, and thank you for the efforts to trying to find more information around how to best serve our communities. So that's great. In terms of budgetary commitments, it's hard for me to think of how we can do that right now. I know we are facing some challenges in terms of budget, so that's one thing that we'll have to sort out as we go through this community process. I know that right now the state is expecting a contraction, the city has forecasted a contraction in terms of revenues, so we don't know yet. But again, we have gone through this process, collaborative process with PTA, with the different teams. Actually, we met with the CPAC at some point last year, so I anticipate that the process will be the same. So, there are different programs that we have. We have the program at the actual, at the Kennedy that is going to require also an anticipated and budgeted item. There are questions around also how do we meet some of the needs at the Winter Hill that also has some special ed populations that require some unanticipated budget items. So there will be things that we actually have to already put in place that have not been part of the budget. So I cannot promise anything, but I think that in the spirit of collaboration and transparency, we will be coming together at some point to identify what are the best ways to distribute the monies that we have to make sure that kids have access to learning.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Superintendent Carmona. In response, Member Patone, to your second point around collaboration, I think we are grateful and very eager to collaborate. We have our Department of Data who would love to collaborate in future, surveys that you have. Our SFLC, as Member Green mentioned, I think would be eager to collaborate with you. I don't know what that would look like in terms of the kind of commitment or the amount that you would prefer to kind of own on your end, and the amount that you would like kind of collaborative support on. But that I think it would be great for us to do that together moving forward in future years.
May I respond? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a note, so something that came to mind as we were working through the survey and the ask for collaboration is it's really hard to be at the table to advocate and to fulfill that participatory role when we don't know what's going on. So like a hired person, that's great, but I think even less than that, we're just asking to be at the table to not make the decisions, but be part of the conversation so that we can bring the special ed lens into conversations.
Ms. Patel, and then Dr. Ackman? Okay, Dr. Ackman and then Ms. Patel? Okay.
Thank you. I'm curious sort of what, because you mentioned that there was, insufficient information on the Somerville Public Schools website, sort of where the information you got that you had has come from, and, what have you found valuable, and what would you like us to be learning from beyond your survey?
I'm sorry, are you, so a lot of the information that we pulled was from DESE, the Department of Early and Secondary Education, Radar, but I don't know, did anyone reference the website? I don't think, yeah. So I don't think we referenced the website in terms of statistics. But what was your second ask? My apologies.
I was curious what, because there's an overwhelming amount of information out there. So is there anything that you've found useful that you would like to see as a model for our district?
I think special ed notoriously is a challenging area to be in. I think that in a lot of districts across the state and across the country, it's hard to do it well. But I guess I'm here to say, like, we can be the leaders in that. So we can compare data to other districts that are also struggling to do it, or we can be the trendsetters and be doing it correctly and be the leaders in all of it. And so that's kind of where I personally come from, is that there's work to be done, but let's do the work and let's be the leaders in what good special ed education can look like and how we can meet all of our kids' needs here.
I have a follow-up? Okay. Thank you, through the chair. I would encourage you to check out the Progress Center. It's called promotingprogress.org. And they focus a lot on this and how sort of in the IEP process that both districts and families should be student-centered, and how that draws the best outcomes and sort of the strategies there as one option.
Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm a big proponent, personally and district-wide, for early identification of students. And I appreciate that the CPAC has brought up this question about how prepared are our educators to have that lens to look at students, and how, I know it's complicated because sometimes educators do identify things and families choose not to bring forward. And we know that that's a thing in any community, but I guess I would be curious to learn a little bit more about the level of PD we provide our educators so that they are prepared to flag and, do the advocacy necessary to have evaluations done. I'm certainly not a proponent for over-identification, and I know there's some concern about that. Also mixed, because where students have multiple concerns, that sometimes things either get lost or get over-diagnosed. So anyway, it's just supporting what they're saying. Early identification in general actually can cost less over the lifetime of a student's experience in the district. We know it avoids outplacements. We know that kids that get support earlier don't start to have, continue to have behavioral issues, and they're able to engage more. So, maybe learning a little bit more about what we can do in terms of kind of mandatory PD for all teachers, particularly for younger students, to be able to, as best they can, flag. Because I know the teachers want to do this, and if they don't have all the skills to do it, that doesn't leave them prepared.
So thank you for the question. As you know, we are working on an implementation of a professional development plan. The science of reading has taken center on the work that we're doing. We know that there is a direct correlation with knowing and also being able to identify gaps that our students have. but you need to have a clear criteria of performance to identify what those are. And so we do better when we know better. We are doing that in literacy across the board. We're doing it with math. The math work that has happened has really, even I'm not a mathematician, but I can see how the logic around math really allows you to understand what are the prerequisite learning skills that a student should have. A teacher has to be able to actually match that gap with what they know, and it just doesn't happen overnight. There's an implementation plan that is happening slowly, slower than I would like it to be, but unfortunately, we move at the pace of also implementation, and so it's going to take some time, but I think we're heading in the right direction in terms of making sure that we have the right tools to be able to diagnose as well as support.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, and thank you for that feedback. I think it's great, and I receive it. And in addition to what Superintendent Carmona said, and as the presentation rightly highlights, there's a lot. It's a massive umbrella, and it's a lot for one educator to be able to know. But we do have tools in place, and we can do better. But we do have tools in place that we're working on. So screeners are an example of that. Those are things that it doesn't require an educator to necessarily be an expert about things, but they're, going through an assessment or a screener. I should use the language screener for children. We do that at the early ed age. Kathleen Baylor, who's our director of early childhood education, maybe touched a bit on this in her presentation, but we have a large kind of across different domains screeners that we do. Some of are, by regulation also, like, through DESE, we have the dyslexia screener, for example. So again, I think we can do better, and I appreciate and receive the feedback. And along the lines of the professional development and kind of the learning that has been described, we also have those tools in place to help so that it's not kind of that massive undertaking. The third prong that I would say is also this MTSS idea that the superintendent fellow, Bobby Beretta, presented on at our last meeting, which is bringing up wondering, so when an educator might not know everything about, but recognizes that there may be something different happening in a classroom and they want to think of how they can better support, that's also another avenue. It's his strategic project, meaning that we have areas to improve on it again, but it is something that we're thinking about deeply. So I just wanted to add that kind of nuance to the ideal around professional development as well.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
Are there more questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Is there more to your superintendent report?
Through the chair, yes, there's a couple of things that I wanted to share with the entire community. One of those is that our strategic plan has a dashboard that is live right now. It's at somerville.k12.us/strategic plan. So I wanted to thank Sam Elagin, who has been one of the main architects of that work. And so when you go to the actual dashboard, you can actually see our overall performance in terms of literacy and math, and there are different indicators there. We also have a student social-emotional data. For the most part, is a comprehensive tool. We're still building it up, but right now you can actually see it live. And please, when you see it, let me know if you have any feedback for us. I also wanted to remind everyone that winter break will be coming soon. We will be having a break starting on Friday. It will be an early release, and the students will be off around noon. They are due back on January the 6th, and the school-based staff will return to school on Friday, January 3rd, for professional development. The district office will be closed at 1 p.m. on December the 23rd and will reopen on December the 26th. And I wish everyone a happy and restful winter break. Thank you very much, and that's the end of the report.
All right. I have one subcommittee report to approve. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Ackman. If there is no discussion, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the AFS CME Food Service Integrated Contract.
I move to authorize the chair to sign the AFS-CME Food Services Integrated Contract.
Motion by Ms. Fatone, motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Ms. Fatone. If there is no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the very large Section A of our policy manual. Ms. Barish.
I just wanted to share with folks that included in this packet were the comments from our legal review for the first half of that section of our policy manual. I expect the rest of those comments probably later this week. We also addressed a few of the questions in our rules subcommittee meeting just now. So those will be, well, you'll see a mention of that in the report at our next meeting. It is indeed a long document. In case it wasn't clear, first what you'll see is a list of all of the policies in the document with just a very brief synopsis of the MASC recommendation for that policy, followed by all of the policies. And it's our version and the MASC version in some cases, with comments and then comments from the legal team. So if you have questions about it, sort of on a logistics standpoint, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also reach out directly to Alicia Mallon at MASC if you have questions. And I think so far, and Rules Subcommittee, please don't hesitate to say I'm wrong, but I think that it's been a positive process, and I think we're all learning quite a bit as we go through these policies. So I'm grateful. I think it was Mr. Green who suggested we do it this way, and so far it's going well.
Okay, thank you for that context. Dr. Ackman.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just want to share deep appreciation for something that in my approaching 7 years has not been touched. So thank you for leading this giant thing and moving it forward. I'm curious if you have suggestions of like anything particular that we should be, like you've laid out what is there, if there are things that you think we should be looking at or just keeping in mind. Like, I saw that the notes seem to be from the lawyers, and like there were a few like, not full legalese, but it was like, only do this if that, and it's like, do we do that? So like, if there's a frame or a lens with which you suggest we look at this, or anything we should zero in on, I'm curious, you as the subcommittee chair.
There is not, I can't suggest anything particular, I guess. Maybe not focusing on the hyper-legal policies because our lawyers are going to do that. Not to say you shouldn't look at them, absolutely look at them, but they are really long, and they're going to change with every administration in higher government. So there's a great chance we're going to be looking at a lot of these policies again in the next few months. I will say that some of the legal comments then resulted in questions for the administration. So it may take a while before this actually comes to the full committee for a vote, because we need to just resolve all those little questions.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Also, thanks to Ms. Barish for leading the charge on this. This first section, there's not as much substantive content change in terms of what we're doing or doing differently. I think that when we hit the next sections, it may be helpful for, as the chair, or you can ask one of us to just kind of have a little laundry list when we first present Section B and Section C, saying, these are like 5 or 6 things you really should spend some time looking at, and not to say that you shouldn't read everything, you should, but there'll be certain things that we'll actually have to make choices, or things that they're recommending that are different than our practice. So anyway, so I'm just making that recommendation when we bring the next ones forward.
And also, if it's helpful, when that happens, we could also break it up into more manageable chunks. We don't necessarily have to just approve all of Section A or whatever it is. We can pass a bunch of, we can play it by ear as to what makes more sense. Did you want to follow up, and then I'll go to Mr. Green?
I just wanted to clarify that my role in leading this charge is fairly minimal. But I appreciate the appreciation, but it's mostly just logistics, and thank goodness for Alicia Mellon and the MASC, because they're doing the heavy work.
Mr. Green?
I just want to start by saying, if this was my suggestion, I apologize. But thank you for your work. And I just wanted to build off of something you said about how a lot of these policies, especially in Section A, change based on administration, because a lot of them are based on how we implement federal regulation. And I would say the good news is it takes administrations quite some time to change federal regulation, which is why the most recent version of some of these non-discrimination policies come from spring of this year. And if that pace continues, given what we may expect to be happening in the next administration, a certain degree of slow walking may not necessarily be the worst thing to our next change of these policies.
I have a kind of silly and nitpicky question, but I noticed one of the policies specifically wants us to list the name and phone number of the person you're supposed to go to if there's a Title IX complaint. And I'm just wondering if it could just be a link to the website where it says that, or if there's some easier way so that anytime a new person becomes that person, you can do it, or is there not a way to do that? Looks like you know the answer.
We did discuss that, at least in the case of one policy, and yes, in fact, it does appear that we can just list like grievances at Somerville, for example, or K12.Somerville, like it could just be an alias sort of inbox as opposed to a name and phone number, because as you said, people change positions and we don't want to have to update the policy every time that happens. I think there are some cases in which you are legally required to put a name, but at least in one policy, I think Ms. Patone actually brought it up. It appeared that we could just have an email address.
Just trying to make it easier for future changes. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, and this will come at a future meeting for a second meeting. For a second meeting, it may not be our first in January, depending on how long the lawyers take to read it. Okay, with that, we have a donation to approve.
I move to accept with gratitude a donation, a monetary donation to the library department from Shalom Somerville in Somerville, Massachusetts, valued at $7,000 to allow all SPS second graders to attend the Library Lion Show at the Adam Theater.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Ms. Patone. If there is no, yes, Ms. Barish?
Could we hear a little bit about what the Library Lion Show is and why we want second graders to go?
Certainly, through the chair. I can get a more detailed description from Tanya Connor, who's our K-12 Library Media Specialist Department Chair. But essentially, the director or head of the show reached out to Ms. Connor to ask about this attending. It's a show in Boston about a character of a lion exploring library, and really wanted students in Somerville to be able to join, and was able to find a donor. So I can't tell you the more specifics than that. I did talk to Ms. Connor extensively about this, but not too much about the content, but I do have it written up in an email, and I'm happy to share that with you.
Just to clarify, I didn't mean to sound skeptical on that. We just often approve donations, and this one it just seemed different from, like a donation of car parts or whatever, which is also wonderful.
Mr. Green.
I was not skeptical about the content. I'm familiar with the book library Lion, but I was curious how the decision is made to send kids from different schools to the same field trip. Like, just out of curiosity, what the decision-making process is that leads to every second grader in Somerville having the same field trip.
Thank you, through the chair. This is a conversation that's happening in many different departments. So in this case, the director reached out to Tanya Connor. Perhaps they have a kind of connection to Somerville and was really thinking this is geared towards this age group, would really love for all second grade students to go, and we have it. That said, similarly, in other subject areas, for example, seventh grade, all seventh grade students, I just had a meeting with Kathleen Seward today to think about a common field trip for all, a common local field trip for all seventh graders who are in a certain unit in the new curriculum, for example. So we are thinking about how do we make, and this is something that will have to be thoughtful in the budget season, and as I think about the curriculum budget and other department budgets, how we might, because it's obviously costly, and then we have the busing fees, but there are a few kind of common experiences that typically field trips are most often planned by educators that kind of know of a outside learning space that aligns with what they're teaching, and we would love to have some common experiences across our district, especially as we roll out some really meaningful curriculum, and there's really outside learning experiences. So I hope that answers the question. In short, we are thinking and planning about how to do that across our district, and in this case, we did not have the funds, but we did have a donor.
Ms. Patone?
Through the chair, it's based on a book apparently, and it's a musical, and they have puppets that were built by Jim Henson's Creature Shop with live music. It sounds like quite a production. That was just me.
Did you Google it for us?
Yes, I did.
Great, thank you. Okay, I had a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Mr. Green. There was some discussion, but now I think we're done, so all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to unfinished business. Dr. Carmona, is there an MSBA update?
Yes, we do have one. Before we do the update, I just wanted to share with you that the district has been celebrating the end of the year concerts, and every time, I don't know if you're like me, but every time I go to a concert, I have this big emotional sense of like wanting to cry for some reasons. It's like, and so every time I go to a concert, I just walk out of there, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So if you haven't had the benefit of attending them, please, let's plan that next year, because it was outstanding, really. The quality of the music and talent of our kids is amazing, and I'll take this time to also thank all our music teachers and in the entire district, because the work has been outstanding. So, thank you. So on that tone of good news, you know that the MSBA meeting was on Friday, and they moved us forward to the next phase, and so that's also good news. As you know, the MSBA is very stickler in terms of the different steps, so they will be with us at every process of the transition throughout the different phases. And beginning the next month, we will actually be working on the next module, which is called the orientation module. And also, we will be communicating this week. We will be sending a communication around this next phase. And beginning next month, we will have the next phase, which is contracting an OPM. And that's actually the city's job. They will be hiring an OPM, which is
What does OPM stand for?
the Honors Project Manager, and as well as the design architecture, the firm. Both of these things are approved by the MSBA, the SBA, the School Building Committee, as well as approved by the MSBA. So it's a set of approvals. I know that there has been a something that was published recently in an article this morning, actually. I got some feedback from some of you around information as to an article that came up that was not accurate, and I just wanted to give a little bit of clarity around that. I know that our chief of communication has asked for correction around the article, but this is what we know is true. So the MSBA board voted to advance us to the next phase of the process. They did not vote to approve a funding proposal, I mean. We have not provided financial proposals yet, and we will not do so for many months. So the article states that the city envisions the new school building to be the home of the Winter Hill and Brown School. This is a mischaracterization, and as we have said many times, the MSBA has generously agreed to give us the option to build a new school to accommodate both schools. However, no decisions have been made. So neither SPS nor the city have made any final decisions about this. So the construction advisory group convened by the city will be making recommendations about this by the end of 2025. So I just wanted to clarify that. It is great news, but there was a little bit of a miscommunication around the article that came up this morning, I believe.
Okay.
And that's the update.
Mr. Bitton, and then Mr. Bitton.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you for the updates. I am curious when the city's website on the MSBA, somervillema.gov/MSBA, which is sort of the portal that we keep referring families to, will be updated with this new information. As of right this moment, the website says the eligibility phase will end no later than November 29th, 2024. So I do think, as there is such great interest around this, that we should try our very best to keep this updated.
Ms. Bitton?
Thank you, through your chair. First of all, thank you to Mr. Bitton for bringing that up. I know this is you read kind of the press release around the correction that was requested, and talked about the end of next year, but I just want to keep reiterating that the city has said November 2025 was the latest that they could get a decision to be made to not interrupt the process. And I'm still going to hold out that the CAG comes up with a recommendation before November 2025. I don't know if that's realistic or likely, but I'm going to keep requesting that and hoping that that accelerates. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
I think at our last CAG meeting, the CAG was fairly insistent that they too want to figure out ways to speed up the timeline. We were not originally scheduled to have a meeting this month. We are having a meeting on Thursday. I hope after that to have some sense of if that's going to happen, or have something to report to you about content of the deliberations. So we'll talk next year.
Thank you for that. Anything else on the MSBA update? Okay, that brings us to items from committee members. Ms. Bitton?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just had a quick announcement of something that came across our email and I've seen on social media, is I just want to publicize about the YMCA having open hours for our Somerville High School students, in particular Friday evenings from 7 to 9 p.m. I think it's movies, food, and socializing. And then on Sundays from 2 to 4, it's basketball and access to gym and working out. So again, I encourage anyone, get the word out about this accessibility to open free times at the YMCA, Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. for more of a social time, and Sundays from 2 to 4 p.m. to be more of an athletic or exercise time.
Thank you. Mr. Bitton?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I had the opportunity to meet with the individual who commented a few meetings ago about our field trip opportunities. We had a very productive conversation, and I wanted to see if there was interest in having a conversation here in the school committee about, Dr. Davis, something you just addressed. So maybe when you are ready to have that conversation around you know, identifying field trips that are aligned with our curricula. I think that would be a really useful conversation. In particular, I'm particularly interested in setting a goal that each student in our district will have an enrichment opportunity for either off-site or on-site learning for each student each year. Not saying that would be funded by the school committee necessarily, could be in collaboration with partners like our PTAs, but just wanted to see if there was interest at a future meeting in discussing that. Thank you.
I think we can add that to a future agenda. And it'll also be important as we discuss budget season, because of course we'll have to figure out whatever it is we decide we want to do, how to pay for it. Ms. Patel?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I think that I want to thank Mr. Vitone for following up with that constituent and getting more information and having, sounds like a very fruitful dialogue. Something that could be helpful in this process is some type of inventory of the types of field trips that are happening in different schools and different districts. You know, you would have to decide how deep you wanted to go into this type of work, and I also realize that every year might be different, but having an idea of the scope of field trips that are happening in the different schools, I think would be, and you know, publicizing that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Happy to do that. We have that information pretty easily available, and I cannot take any credit. Danielle Berry is amazing and able to organize that, and Erica Garcia previously also did a very excellent job organizing that. So we have that information readily available. A wondering that I would have that is not necessarily for this time, but could be answered at a later time, would be, what are we hoping the goal for the conversation to be? That will just help me to prepare as best as I can, get some information. Obviously, so many educators are very dedicated to finding off, so it's also kind of making sure that I'm in dialogue and collaboration there to understand based on whatever the goals of the conversation are.
Ms. Paton?
Thank you for that. And I think it's very tricky because I'm just going to make a statement. Field trips are often a reflection of the educator's comfort and desire to take kids either off-site. And not every educator, they can be fantastic in the classroom, but maybe going off-site is not necessarily their skill set, particularly for overnights, which in general are volunteer things that educators do and parents really try to fill in. So I think I want to make sure when we do have that conversation that that context is there. And I also want to take care and maybe incorporate our Director of Equity and Excellence into this conversation, because it's a really hard one to have, because we don't want to take away from students, but at the same point in time, if we're not having equitable experiences, it can be really challenging for our value set. So anyway, I'm just putting that as a framing, and I'm sure you guys are already thinking about that more than I am, but
And I don't want to go too deeply into this since it's not on our agenda, but Dr. Ackman and then Mr. Baton.
I'm very cautious about how we are defining equitable. That's all, through the chair, is because, you know, while we prioritize neighborhood schools, we also do permit families to choose schools that, you know, have various opportunities. And, you know, I think there's a lot of work that is wonderfully being done at like assessing and having, you know, the same assessments across the board and being able to understand. But, you know, I firmly believe that each school is allowed elements of their own culture and community and values. And so I don't disagree, and I'm very excited for this conversation, but I'm also cautious of how we're using equitable.
Mr. Baton?
Thank you, Chair, through you, and mindful that this is not on our agendas, but I just wanted to respond to Dr. Davis. And for me, I think the goal would be coming to some kind of consensus around what our goals as a school committee should be for for off-site learning opportunities in alignment with our curriculum, which is, again, what you already alluded to. So very much goal setting.
Okay. Are there any other items from committee members? Okay. Seeing none, we do not have any condolences this evening, so we are adjourned. Have a wonderful vacation. December break, whatever we're calling it these days. December break, I don't know. You know.